It's not going to get in no hurry. They got people all over the place in this building this morning. I had strep in hand, foot, and mouth concurrently. It was terrible. Got the hand, foot, and mouth from the baby. I don't know where I got the strep from. It's true. There's no telling. I just know that like the last 3 weeks have just been uncomfortable. All right, so Christmas Day, 102. I topped out at 103.6 for Christmas Day, and I sat there, and my wife was like, "Yeah, we're just gonna go to my mom's." Why? Oh, nice. Well, she didn't listen anyway. She don't even need them. Yeah. Yeah, the fluid got trapped behind it. They're going to have to go in there and poke a hole. I wouldn't doubt it.
So you can figure
I wouldn't doubt
it
it.
out.
You're still alive? I know that feeling. I know that feeling that you have right now. All right, you beautiful people. People. It's a little John Wayne for you. I guess I'm not talking loud enough for anybody to hear me. Good morning, everybody. Hey, good morning, Mark. Boy, if you don't sit down. I know it's them women. But I'm not going to say nothing to them because I'm not that brave. I'm not that brave. I'm that dumb, but I'm not that brave. All right. Well, it has been a few weeks since I've been up here. It seems like my entire world fell apart with sick babies, sick me, holidays, all this good jazz, all that stuff, life. It's not fun most of the time. They said, have kids, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Somebody's a liar. I think that came direct from the devil. Well, does anybody remember where we were last time? No. It's been, it's been nearly a month now, hadn't it? But y'all remember all that stuff we had been talking about, right? Because we've been at it for nearly 3-ish months now, 2.5 months now. We talked about the law of exclusion. We talked about the law of grace, law of grace. And then what else did we talk about? Responsibility. Responsibility of the weak to the strong, and the responsibility of the strong to the weak. What was the rundown of that? What's the responsibility of the strong? Romans 14 is to bear with the shortcomings of the weak, or the unbelief of the weak, or the weak faith of the weak. I know it sounds harsh to say the weak faith of the weak, but that's literally what Paul said. The weaker. And then what's the responsibility of the weaker? It's kind of the opposite of the responsibility of the stronger. Yes. The responsibility of those weaker in faith is to learn from those stronger in faith, to grow into the instruction of those who are more stronger than you, who know the things that you do not, or understand the things that you do not. All of that good jazz. I'm going to close this door on Tyrell. He belongs in the kids' class anyways. So, then after that, we talked about the 2 types of people, right? Because having a knowledge of those 3 basic principles helps you to, number 1, better understand, right? Because God said, so do. You don't always know exactly what to do, so grace And because you don't always know what to do, ask somebody who's stronger, right? So number one, that's for you, to help you grow you. But then it's our job to turn around and do what?
Help someone else.
Teach the rest, right? And so there's two types of people when it comes, basically two types of people when it comes into teaching others, right? And those are, what? Subjective and objective. I'm one of those objective people. It's not that I don't have emotions, I just don't rely on them for my decision-making process. Now, is there anything wrong with being either one of those types of people when it comes to faith? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Just because you think with your heart does not mean that you're wrong, right? And don't let anybody ever tell you that. Now, if you think with your heart and then they contextually prove it wrong, then you got to grow past that. But I just feel. Well, doesn't matter because God said. That's the way that it is. Objective people like me and Tyrell and Pat, who's not here, so I can pick on him freely. He can't even defend himself. Yes. Objective people like us, we don't really rely on how we feel about something as to whether we believe that it's true or not. We look at the facts, we look at the logic, the timelines, the this, the that's, and so and this is kind of a dangerous statement, but I don't mean for it to be. I feel, that means I got to come over here because it's an opinion. I feel like it is easier for objective people to grasp new spiritual concepts because our feelings about what we already know don't take a part in what we are receiving as far as new information. Does that make sense, or was that just gobbledygook? Does that make sense? Okay. But then again, also remember that was way over there on Chad's opinion box, and so it doesn't really matter because the book matters, Chad does not. Okay, so we've kind of brought back up to speed here. So we're going to get going today with yet more tools for teaching the objective and the subjective. And we're going to do it out of Matthew and John. And of course, obviously, we're going to be going all over the place because that's what I do. So, which one of you fine gentlemen wants to open us up with a prayer this morning? Terry Russell, come on down.
Father, which art in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you for this beautiful day that you've given us, Father. Father, we are so thankful for Jesus and as your Son and as our great sacrifice, Father. Father, thank you for forgiveness and thank you for your grace, Father. Father, be with us as we study that word. Be with those that are presenting the word today, and may they have ready recollection, Father. Father, go with us and forgive us as our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Terry. Okie dokie. So, historical reliability. Y'all remember us talking about that? How you take the Bible and use it as a bit of a history book. And when I say a bit of a history book, I mean an exact history book. Right? And then we talked about archaeology, how the Bible has been used to go places. It's been used like a road map for treasure hunters. Right? Napoleon was one of those who did that. He conscripted, hired, forced this huge amount of people. It was 300 and something, I don't remember the exact figure, 300 and something people to go with the Bible and use it to find places where battles took place and where treasures were laid up from the Old Testament. And he was very successful in doing that. And it just kind of one of those things that just further proves the historical accuracy of the Bible. And if you can prove the historical accuracy of the Old Testament by proxy until you can disprove it, it proves the historical accuracy of the New Testament. But fortunately for us, when the things that were taking part in the New Testament that we care about, the whole, birth, death, crucifixion, resurrection, way of salvation, was recorded at a time when there was many people alive and around, and they could just go, yeah, no, that didn't happen. But the problem is there's no one doing that. The problem is that historical writers didn't say, no, that guy didn't exist. In fact, a lot of historical writers who are even anti-Christ, like, don't like Jesus, Jews, cough, cough, wrote plenty of things that just further and further and further prove the existence of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, they don't help us in any way proving the deity of Christ, but they do prove his existence. And what they don't do is they don't disprove anything that was written. So when it says in John chapter 2 that Jesus turned a bunch of water into wine, there are no historical writers around that time that say, no, he didn't. And there were people around writing things that could have very easily done that. In, was it Luke chapter 7? Jesus is coming through town with his apostles. Is it Luke chapter 7? He's in Nain. Yeah, it's Luke chapter 7. Him and his apostles are coming through the town of Nain, and there was a funeral procession coming by, and everybody is, unhappy, obviously. It's a funeral procession. And the mother of this child that had passed away is just beside herself, as she rightly should be, right? And Jesus just walks up and goes, what's going on here? Oh, he's just asleep. Wake up, kid. The kid just pops right back up. He resurrects this kid right there in the funeral procession. There was plenty of people going around in the world writing history and writing records of what was going on that could have said, no, he didn't. But they didn't. Nobody disproved that. Nobody said, no. Now, what that's called is called the acid test. So, you put something in acid, it either purifies or it dissolves. Thanks, chemist. Chemical engineer degree in here, just helping me with my stuff. I like it. So acid does one of two things to things. It either purifies it or dissolves it. So when people were saying, hey, this happened, these other people who are secondary to the event are the acid, and they were alive and there and witnessed things to literally say, no, it didn't. But how many records do we have from historical writing, people saying, yeah, so where the Bible says that Jesus raised this kid, or where Jesus raised Lazarus, that didn't actually happen. He just, he went and they had a good cry right there at the tomb, and then they went on about life. There's no writings that say that. There's no writings disproving the events that Jesus did, the events that are recorded for us. So, go over real quick to Luke. It's in Luke. It's in the early part of Luke. Let's say Luke 2. Sorry, my thoughts are a little bit discombobulated this morning. They're going to all flow together in the end, I promise. They always do. Luke chapter 2. Yeah, Luke chapter 2, because we're talking about acid test and historical record keeping. All right, Luke chapter 2, right here in verse 1. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while, somebody say it, I can't, Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him. Wasn't married at the time, but pledged to be married to him, but she was expecting a child. That's an interesting situation in those days, right? While they were there, it came time for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloths, placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. No room at the inn for the baby. But, historically, see, Luke, when he wrote this, Luke was a doctor, right? Luke was also one of the greatest biblical historians that we have, because he did something that not many of the other biblical writers did, is he would give things that could go back and be researched down to the day and almost the time of day. See, right here, he said, in the days of Caesar Augustus. Well, who was Caesar Augustus? Historically, who was Caesar Augustus? He was the emperor of Rome. When was he emperor of Rome? Right around before BC became AD. I don't know the exact date either. I was hoping somebody would just throw it out there. But you can go back and you can Google on your, in fact, somebody do it right now. Google on your phone, Caesar Augustus. And it'll tell you when he was born, it'll tell you when he died. Roughly. I hope. I'm stepping out on a limb here. This could be interesting. What you got? So he was 27 BC is when he was born until his death in 14 AD. Is that what you said?
No, he reigned
Oh, he reigned
from 27 BC until his death
in AD 14. So that's when he reigned. But you can verify what the Bible said. So during that time, during the time of Caesar Augustus, now you have a time in space and time. Because the Bible didn't happen in a vacuum. Jesus wasn't in this little unobtainable, nobody saw it happen thing. It's not just a story. It was actual life events. And you can go back and look and see the names, the places, the people that were involved in it. So during Caesar Augustus, so we're talking about from 27 AD until 14 BC, or 27 BC until 14 AD. That's a time period that you can go back, and there's histories upon histories upon histories written during that time period. Do any of them say that Caesar Augustus didn't exist? Do any of them say that Jesus didn't exist? No. But do you also find writings from that time period that say that he did? Didn't we talk about those a couple of weeks ago? We have some writings from people that are all the way up until, I think I quit around 300 AD is when I finally stopped. We have Tacitus. We have Marabar Serapion. We have Pliny the Younger. We have Josephus. Now, what's the significance of Josephus writing anything? Josephus was the Jewish Jew that ever Jewed in Judaism. He was a big-time Jew, but he was also a big-time Jewish historian. So, when Jews look at history, they go to the writings of Josephus because he wrote so much history for them. And he did such a good job of meting out all of the dates and all the events and all of that. But what did Josephus have to say? Does anybody remember? This Yeshua fella, which is Jewish, Hebrew for Jesus. Yeah, he was a really good dude, and then we crucified him because he was a heretic. But what does that do for us? What does that tell us about this Yeshua fella?
Proves that he was alive.
He existed. He was a person in space and time during the time of Caesar Augustus.
He's also mentioned in the Quran.
Several times. But the Quran, so yes, very much so. The problem that I have with using the Quran as a history is it was written so far. So the Quran didn't come around until about 600 AD, which doesn't necessarily invalidate the historical validity of some of the things. But there's just so many sources that are within 30, 40, 70 years. And that's actually, those writings are what the Quran was used, or what was used to write the Quran. So, yes, just one more you can use. So let's keep going here. Okay, so he issued that he decreed that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. So we know all of this took place under Roman rule. What were the Romans known for other than, warfare and wine and all of that good stuff? They were phenomenal historians. They kept record upon record upon record upon record of everything that ever recorded that was a recordable record. And they would write it down. And this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. That's another one of those Googlable names that you can go back and say, okay, well, this is just one more time that I can say, yep, it existed. It happened. It was, in fact, an event that took place, not some mythical, really good, feel-good story, which for the subjective, you don't need that much of this right here. You can say, look, in history, this guy, and he happened. And through their feeling and desire for feeling, you can move from there. For guys like me, you got to hammer this into my head. Go, no, Google it. No, you think you're so smart? Google it. And that's what it takes for dum-dums like me who are analytical and stubborn. That's like the worst combination. It's like the worst combination. All right, now, flip over to chapter 3. In the verse 1. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Somebody Google Tiberius Caesar with the quick fingers. Somebody. When did this happen?
He was immediately after the first Caesar.
15 AD. 14 AD until he died in...
Well, he was 37 when he lost the reign.
When he lost the reign. Okay, well that's sufficient. So we know that he existed. So 15 years into his reign, so now that puts us at what time? Because we know Augustus Caesar made it to 14 AD. So 15 years into Tiberius. Tiberius took over in 14. That gives us 29. No. 14 and 19. That's 33. Is that right? Yeah, 14. Yeah, 14 and 15. Yeah, that would be 29. See, like I said, hard-headed, objective, and not very smart. That is why I push a broom a lot at work. Okay, so now we're up to 29 AD. But see, why does that matter? Why does it matter that we're at 29 AD? It doesn't. It doesn't matter that we're at 29 AD. It matters is that we can prove that we're at 29 AD, where there's historical records of things that were taking place all during these rules here. But we can say, well, this is 29 AD. This is when that happened. Guarantee it. And then the significance here in Luke is it's talking about John receiving the word in the wilderness, and he went about preaching baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. Okay? Historical history. You can prove that it happened. Extra tidbit here from way over here. Anybody ever notice when you read Luke chapter 3 and it says, during the 15th year of Tiberius, the reign of this and that and Hudikai and whatnot and so forth, the word came to John in the wilderness and he went about preaching baptism for the forgiveness of sins as it was prophesied. You ever notice that nobody said boo about it? Like if you look, you read the New Testament about John the Baptist and you read, nobody said boo about it right up until what? And then all of a sudden, God, we don't like this guy anymore. But who was coming? When you read about John the Baptist, who was coming to him for this baptism for the forgiveness of sins? Who was coming to him during that time? Who was he preaching to? He wasn't preaching to Christians, I can tell you that, because we didn't exist yet. He was preaching to Jews, and what were they doing? Converting in droves. But nobody said boo about it right up until Jesus came. Why? Because that's the way God said it was going to happen. So that's the way it had to happen. Because if God says this, that's what it is. When you go back and to validate my opinion over there, you can go back and look at all your footnotes where it takes you back and it shows you the prophecy of this, the prophecy of that. And one of these days I'm going to put that all together and we're going to do a really fun class series about all that stuff. Yes, ma'am?
The prophecies also said that he would be the new king, right? So when they realized that he was the person who was being prophesied about, they discovered then they became, what do you call it?
Materialistic.
No, then they
Oh, you're talking about the Jews. Yeah, I'm with you now.
They became
A little unhappy about it.
Felt threatened.
threatened, that's the word I was looking for. They were now threatened, where they were.
And so that message up until that point, that beautiful message that was being preached, it wasn't a problem for them until it was a problem for them. But had they listened to their own history, and this is what, it doesn't keep me up at night, but I haven't been able to get this one in my own head yet, is if they had all the prophecies and they had all the writings, and I'm talking about the Jews, they had all of that, why didn't they get it?
Because they were carnal.
Because they were threatened by their own status.
And but that's still, why? Why? I mean, I'm a human being too, and they weren't happy that he wasn't a physical king there for a little while. They tried to force him to, and he said nah, and he ran away. But given the fact that the prophecies existed, Jesus said something, and Tim can tell me where it is because he's smarter than me. Jesus said something to the apostles one time, and he said, well, it's just, you're not ready to understand it. And I wonder if that didn't carry over to them Jews. Now that's a thought for way over there in Chad's opinion box. It doesn't really matter. Maybe you want to think about that one too, but maybe when Jesus said, you're not yet ready to bear what I have to say to you, maybe that was true for everybody. They just couldn't quite perceive the depth of the prophecies at the time. I don't know the answer to that one. That one is just more questions than answers for me. Tim, do you got anything on that? Yep. He's like, yeah, nope. You're right there all over it. Don't know. And I guess at the end of the day, that question doesn't need to be answered. We're still going to make it to heaven without knowing the answer to that. In fact, we're kind of going to make it to heaven because we don't know the answer to that. Because if they'd have fully understood the prophecies, they might not have done what they were supposed to do, and then things would have had to work out a different way. Now, would they have worked out a different way? Absolutely, because God said we're going to have a way to heaven, so we would have had one, regardless. But it all worked out the way that He said it was supposed to for whatever reason. So at the end of the day, objectively and subjectively, who cares? We got it. We got that way to salvation. We're good. Let's push on. Sorry, I went a little bit off on a tangent there. Okay, so historical validities, times, dates, things that we can verify in space and time. Okay, now let's go and let's look at, we have a little bit of time. Let's look at the trial, the death, and the burial of Jesus. So, John chapter 18. John chapter 18. We'll start in 28 and we'll go forward. And then Matthew 25? 26? I don't like when that happens to me. I can't remember where something is. You know what it says, but then you can't remember exactly where it's at. And it makes you feel kind of dumb when you go looking for it and it's not anywhere where you thought it was. Yeah, so let's go Matthew. Let's do Matthew 27-ish. Yeah, we'll start around 27. Yeah, Matthew 27. Okay, Matthew or John? Which one do you want to do first? John? Okay, everybody's already there. Excuse me. Starting in verse 28. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the place where the Roman governor, to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because, Jews, time of the Passover, the rules that they didn't realize they were about to finish up where they didn't have to do them anymore. All right, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and he said, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" If he were not a criminal, they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." And Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." Are you familiar with the way that the Romans and the Jews were coexisting at the time during their occupation? All right, so the Romans ruled the roost, and in order to rule the roost easier, they said, "All right, you Jews, take care of yourselves, and if you're doing something that we don't like, we'll let you know and you stop it, okay? So essentially the Jews were governing the Jews, and the Romans were governing the Gentiles and the Jews, but just a little bit. Okay, so when it came to matters of the Jewish law and criminality, jurisprudence and all that good stuff, which I didn't have jurisprudence there, the Romans said, you guys take care of it. The only thing you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to put to death anybody. If somebody needs to be put to death, that's going to have to come to us. You present your case, we'll try the case and decide whether or not we're going to do that or not. Okay, so Pilate says to him, judge him by your own law. And they say that little key, you know how you can say little key phrases when you go certain places to really get everybody's attention? Like you can walk into a bank and say bomb, and everybody looks up, right? So they said this little key phrase to a Roman governor that would make him go, huh? So what they said to him was, but we have no right to execute anyone. So they caught Pilate's attention real quick with that. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to have. That he was going to get killed on a cross because Jews don't crucify, Romans do. Okay. And Pilate then went back in the palace and summoned Jesus and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, is that your idea? Or is that what somebody told you was your idea? All right, am I a Jew? A little bit of sarcasm there. Am I a Jew? What would I know about it? Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And here's Dad's favorite verse in the Bible. Whoa, what is truth? That's a loaded question. That's not a loaded question, it's just a really big question. Retorted Pilate. With this, he went out to the Jews and gathered and said, I find no basis to charge him, but it is your custom for me to release a prisoner to you at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews, or do you want Barabbas? And they said, no, we want Barabbas. He's a murderer. He seems much better for us to have back into our population than this Jesus fella. All right, so Jesus took him and had him flogged. They twisted together a crown of thorns. They put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. And they went up from him again, saying, Hail the King of the Jews! And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and gathered the Jews. Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. When Jesus came out wearing the crown and the thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, Here is the man. And as soon as the chief priests and officials saw him, they shouted, Crucify, crucify, crucify. But Pilate answered, You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge. And then we're gonna paraphrase, which I guess I've been doing a little bit all along, and we're going to skip forward just a little bit. So he says, You do it. And then he washes his hands of the matter and says, I'm not sticking my nose into this. But his men apparently decided that they would do it for them because the Roman soldiers still made the cross, stapled him to it, hung it up. All at the behest of the Jews, who decided that crucify, 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 even in the fact that the Romans said, no, we're not going to do it, breaking the law of the Romans as the Jews decided to do it anyways. We have no king but Caesar, the chief priest answered, which, as a Jew, they would not have been allowed to say that, would they? But yet, here it is, another example of, we did it anyways, because we really wanted to have our way. And then they led Jesus away. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross that they had to make for him. And though you could imagine, as a carpenter, he probably wouldn't have had any trouble with that task on his own. He went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is Golgotha. There they crucified him with two others. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross, and it read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. The sign was in Aramaic, in Latin, and in Greek. They wanted everybody, he wanted everybody that came by to know what was going on. They're crucifying this man as the King of the Jews, even though I told them not to. Pilate made it very well known. I have written what I have written is what Pilate said, which is very similar to, in the Greek language, is very similar to what Jesus said that got him into a lot of trouble a couple of times, right? Before Abraham was, I am. Which to the Jews was Jesus saying, I am God himself. It's a very powerful statement. It indicates the omnipotence, the deity, and the preeminence of all things. Just like the way that it is written in Roman here, in Greek, is, I have written what I have written. It is beyond contest. It is true. And you don't have anything to say about it. That's the way that it was written. That has a little bit more power in it when you think of it in those terms than, I've written what I wrote. I'm not going to change it. That would be inconvenient. No, he wrote it that way on purpose because Pilate knew. Pilate wasn't, just like I said, this didn't all happen in a vacuum. Pilate knew about these events. When Jesus was first brought in, he said, are you the king? And Jesus said, is that your idea? Do you think that I am the king? Or is somebody telling you that I'm the king? Pilate knew what was going on. He knew who Jesus was. He knew what he was doing. He knew the history of the Jews. Because, like I said, Romans are historians. He knew all the things. He knew when he put Jesus out there to be crucified that he was, in fact, crucifying the king. Not a king, but the king. That's why he wrote what he wrote. And it was not something that could be contested. It was not something that could be changed. It was not something that could be mocked. He wrote it. But that's not necessarily in the history books. But what is in the history books is that Pontius Pilate existed. Now, I have run smooth enough out of time that I am going to stop there because the next part would take much more time than what I have. But we're going to come next week. We're going to come right back to here. So you just put your little mark right there. And don't forget over the week what we talked about today, because it'll save us a lot of time next week. I have written what I have written. Before Abraham was, I am. All right, I love you people.